Okay, so let's go out to Google Classroom and let's go to classwork and let's go to source files and let's click the link. We're going to need two items this time, so let's go ahead and grab Chat 13 zip. Let's download that. And then there's another one called Chat 13 underscore files. We're going to need that as well. So let's go ahead and open Eclipse and let's do a file import projects, existing projects into Workspace. And we're going to grab Chapter 13 and we're going to click Finish and go ahead and click Cancel here. And let's see what's going on with Chapter 13. Okay. Let's do this real quick. Let's double click on CSS Demo 1. And I hate this. Oh, is it? Okay. I'm going to try it. There we go. And I'm going to click on the Run button to see if it works. Yep. Okay. Next thing we want to do is let's go back out to our download folder and let's grab that Chapter 13 files. Let's double click on that. And let's grab everything. I'm going to do a Control A to select everything. And I'm going to click Copy. And then we're going to go to the Workspace and double click on Chapter 13. And let's do a paste. Chapter 13. And let's do a paste. Okay, so I think we're set. Okay, so let's get started. Any questions before we get started? Okay, so this chapter, the first thing it starts out with, I don't know if you're familiar with HTML and cascading style sheets, CSS, but what this allows us to do is this allows us to actually format the fonts and the buttons and the colors and all that sort of thing on our application, on our screen. And if you look on page 824 and 825, these are the different CSS type selectors that we can utilize to format our stuff. And we're going to start with the -FX, and then it's going to be whatever that particular item is, a text, a font, text fill, whatever the case may be. But if you look at the bottom of page 824, those are the current corresponding type selectors. So if I'm going to format my button, I'm going to use the dot button or a dot check dash box, dot check dash menu dash item, dot combo dash box, so on and so forth. So that's how we'll utilize them. And then on the top bottom page 825 are the different type of CSS that we can utilize at the top of page 826. And so what that would look like is, you don't have to do this, I'm just going to open up mine. But I'm going to open up my workspace, and I'm going to go to Chapter 13. I'm going to go to source files. And in there, no, I'm sorry, not there. It's going to be right here. It's going to be right here in this, what we just pasted in, those extra files. And here's demo1.css. So when I open that up, that's what it looks like. It says .label, and then it's got an open brace and closing brace. And so this -fx text alignment, think of this. The -fx text that is needed for FX. If we were doing web page programming, we would actually remove that part and we would just have the alignment. Okay. Font family, font size, text alignment. I'm sorry. The -fx that's the part that gets removed. So text alignment would be center. So again, if we were doing this on a web page, get rid of the -fx and everything else would be utilized perfectly in CSS or cascading style sheets. So what we're doing this now is we're going to format this to our Java FX. So we're going to say that, so for this label, notice it's actually pointing to a label. We want the text alignment to be center. We want the font family to be cursive. We want the font size to be 14 pixels. We want the font style to be italics. We want the font weight to be bold, and we want the border style to be dotted. So let's take a look at this. This is just a standard Java FX where we create a label called Hello World. We create a VBox. We set the alignment of that VBox to center, so that's going to be centered. Whatever's inside the VBox will be centered inside the VBox, not the text itself. The VBox set padding, we're going to set that to 10. We put the VBox in a scene, and look at this. This is how we get that style sheet. We say scene.getStyleSheets. This is a method that calls another method. So the scene has a method called getStyleSheets, and inside of that method we call .add, and it's going to add this file. Now again, if I had this file stored somewhere else, I'd have to put the full path right here. I might do C:\/ whatever that particular item might be. So I could actually put the full path inside there. But since I have it stored in the same workspace that this is stored in, it's going to look there. And there's our primary stage. We go ahead and put the scene in the stage. We then show the stage. Notice we don't have a title that we're putting on this thing. So when we run this, notice there is our label. It's bolded, it's italicized, it's a cursive. It doesn't look cursive to me, but it's a cursive style. It's got the dotted line around it. Okay. So very easily we can actually put really nice formatting for our Java FX forms that we basically display. Okay, so that's simple enough. If we take a look at the next CSS file, I should have just left that open, which is the demo2. If we look at that, look at this. Now I'm actually putting style on a label, and I'm putting style for a button. So I got .label, and it looks like the font family is cursive, the font size is 14, the font style is italics, border style dashed. For the button, the font size is 10 pixels, and the font weight is 900. Now the font weight is like bolding. There's like kind of bolded, a little bolder, a little bolder, a little bolder, and all the way up to really heavy bolding. And so we're going to do 900. So let's see how that looks. How do we utilize that in the code? Well, if we open up CSS demo 2, we can see that we created a label, and it says this is a label. We've got a button 1 and a button 2. And it basically says button 1 and button 2 on it. We create an HBox, and we're going to have the spacing as 10. We're going to put the label and the button 1 and button 2 in the HBox. We're going to put the center line in the HBox, and then we're going to put padding around the HBox of 10 pixels. We put the HBox in a scene, Look at this. Our scene now says get style sheet, add file demo to CSS. We then put that scene in a stage. We then show the stage. So let's run it. And there it is. Notice there is our dotted line around that. It's 14 pixels, and each button, basically, it's got the font weight 900, so it's a little bolder than normal. So we can really, now this is an H box, so H box is, it's horizontal this way. Okay, so any questions on that? Pretty simple stuff. Now, if you remember last week, we talked about the leaf and the branch. I'm sorry, the root, the branch, and the leaf. And the root has things that branches off of that. The branch can have other branches come off of that, but a leaf is a standalone. It just branches off once, and that's the only thing that's there. So what we can do is this. I'm going to open up CSS Demo 3. And notice that says .root. Now .root says, guess what? This is everything. Everything's going to have this basically style. It's going to be a font family of serif. If you're probably not familiar with serif, serif's like, I don't know if you're familiar with Times New Roman, but it's got like, well, I'll point it out once we run it. And then the dot label is going to have a font size of 14 and a font weight of bold. And it's also going to have, so a label is also going to have a font family of serif as well. So if we take a look at CSS Demo 3, here we create a label called My Label Hello World. We got My Button, Click Me. We create a vertical box, spacing 10. We put the label and the button in there. We go ahead and set the alignment for everything inside the V box to center. We set the padding to the V box of 10. We create a scene. We put the V box in a scene. Then we set the style sheet to the scene. I go ahead and say demo3.css. I put the scene in a stage, and then I show the stage. I run it. And notice there is my hello world. Now, when I talked about serif, see how we've got the little tabs at the end? Those are serifs. If it's a sans serif, then it doesn't have it. You can't really see it, but the Click Me has those as well. So they both basically fall into the serif style font. Again, we don't have any event handling, so we click on the button and nothing happens. So if we take a look at Demo 4 CSS, again, we've got the root, has a font size of 20. So that says everything inside of here is going to have a font size of 20. But notice I've got labels set to font size of 10. So this is kind of the overall, and then we're going to override that for the label to 10, and we're going to change the font weight to bold. So we take a look at CSS Demo 4, and there I've got my button, my label, Hello World. There's my button, Click Me. Put them in a V box, spacing 10. We center everything inside the V box. We set padding on the V box to 10. We then put the V box in the scene. We then go ahead and set the style sheet to that scene, demo4.css. Put the scene in the stage. We show the stage. I run it. And notice, now remember I talked about the serif? These aren't serif fonts because it doesn't have the little tabs at the end of each little line there. So there's Hello World. Now remember, everything was set to a font size of 20, except we overrode the label. We said make that, I think it was 9. So notice how the label's a lot smaller and everything else is a font size of 20. So that button is a font size of 20. If we go to demo 5, look at that. Now we can do this. This is totally legal in CSS. I can say dot label and dot button is going to have these cascading style sheet attributes. So the labels and buttons are going to have a font family cursive, a font size of 14, and the font style of italic. So I open up 5. And same thing, I got hello world, click me, here's my label, my button, position center, everything's the same, except down here we say demo 5. So now when we run it, everything has the same exact font. Notice it's got font size cursive, size 14, and italics. Now, if we open up demo 6, it's got a dot label, font size 24, text fill. Now this is a color. They're using basically an RGB color, and it's FFFFF, which I think is black. And the back, no, I think it's white. And the background color is going to be hashtag 909090. So this one here is going to have the text a certain color and the background a different color. Oh, excuse me. So let's run, let's open up demo 6. And it's pretty much has everything the same thing except, whoop, that should be demo 6 right there. Change that to demo. If yours is demo 5, change it to 6. So it's pretty much the same exact thing except it's got a different CSS here. Now when we run it, well, it didn't do anything, did it? No, did yours work? Or does yours look like mine? It's supposed to look like this. Okay. I'm gonna run it. No, it's not what I want. That's not what I was expecting. You know, I'm gonna try it. I want to go back to 5. I'm gonna change 5 to 6 and see what happens. Huh. I'm gonna go. Let's open up 7. I'm gonna open up 7. CSS demo 7. I'm gonna change that to 6. Let's see what happens. There, that's what I'm expecting. So notice it's got the hashtag all F's is a white font, and notice we set the background color to hashtag 909090, which is a gray. If we take a look at demo 7, it says it's got a font size 24, And this time we're using RGB. So the other way is a hexadecimal number where we can actually do a hashtag and then a number, a six character number. And it's hexadecimal, meaning it goes from 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F. RGB, so this first one is red, the next one is green, and the next one is blue. So we can go to the color chart and look up those numbers. It's 255 is the highest. I believe that does the same thing, which is white. And then the background color is RGB 144, 144, 144. I think we're going to get the same exact results. They're just trying to show you we can do it in hexadecimal or we can do it in RGB. So let's come over here and let's change this from demo 6 to demo 7. And I'm going to save it and then I want to run it. And notice we pretty much get the same thing. So RGB 255, 255, 255 is white, and 144, 144, 144 is gray. So basically what I'm trying to show you is we can use hexadecimal or we can use RGB, and there's actually a couple of other ones we can use as well, but in the web world. But so a couple of different ways we can add color. So any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to take a look at demo8.css. And notice what we do here is we say FX text fill, we just say white. And we say FX background color blue. Okay, it's just simple enough. So if I come back over here to number 7, I'm going to change that from demo 7 to demo 8. And I click save and run. Oh, come on. It should be a background. Oh, does it? Okay. Well, you can see it firsthand then. So yeah, that should have been white and blue. Let me do this. Yeah, somehow it's getting cached in there somehow. Anyways, yeah, so you ran fine for you, which is great. Now, if we take a look at demo9.css, there I've got button, dot button black, and dot button white. And the background color is black, text fill is white, background color white, text fill black. So if we look over here in our code for CSS demo number 9, I've got a button 1, and it's button 1, and the button get style. Now look at this, button 1.get style class add button black. So there is, it's assigning the button black, and then button 2.get style button white. So this is the style that's going to be applied. Now this must be somewhere in the style sheet. Yeah, we didn't really cover that in the other ones because they wasn't there. But now we can actually use this .get style class, which is a method, it's part of the button, and we can use another method called add, and we actually then give the label of the actual style that's in this CSS file. Button black and button white. So I come down here and I put the buttons in an H box. I center everything in the H box. I set padding of the H box. I put these H box in the scene, and then I add, that's where I set the style sheet. This file 9 gets added to that style sheet, and then I set the scene and to the stage, and then I show the stage. I run it, and there I have my button black background, white text, and this one's got the white background, black text. So we can get very specific in what we want to apply the style to. And we can use that with the get style class. Now, that's not just every single one of these controls has this get style class method that we can utilize. So this get style class can be added to any one of the controls, to a label, to a text box, to whatever we need to. Okay, any questions on any of the cascading style sheets that we can utilize? Now, I do want to say that on page 836, they really don't have any examples, but let's talk about it. In a real web design world, we have two things inside of cascading style sheets. We have what are called classes and IDs. Anything that starts with a period, like this dot button black, that's considered a class style. If I had a hashtag in front of that, that would be known as an ID file. Now, class cascading styles are those are used for everything inside of that particular dialog box. An ID, when we use the hashtag, that's really designed for one specific item. So we could have done that here, since we were basically doing that. Is I could have used a hashtag. I don't think it really would have changed anything per se. Well, I'm going to experiment and see if it would have. So let me save that. Let me come back over here and rerun this. Yeah, no, it changed it because we have to utilize it says all node IDs should be unique within the scene graph. Unfortunately, the Java compiler does not check for duplicate IDs, and no exception will be thrown if a runtime and two nodes have the same ID. It is your responsibility as a developer to make sure that you do not assign the same ID to more than one node. So we'd have to do this. I think it's dot set ID. Yeah, there we go. It does work for you, okay. Well, I think I have to put that button black right in there, like that. Yeah. So ID button black and dot set ID. Button white. Let's see. I think that will basically work. Now, did it work for you? Okay. Yeah, I don't. Let me try something real quick. Now, on the top of page 837, another thing we can do is, instead of utilizing a cascading style sheet, I could do this, where I could just say dot set style, and inside of there I could type something like this. I could actually type the actual style in there and say dash FX dash font size colon 24 PT, and I don't need a semicolon. I could do it that way as well. And now when we run it, oh, that frustrates me. That should work. Anyways, that's called inline. Just like in a website, I can actually put the style right in line with the code. I can use a style sheet, I can use a page style sheet, or I can actually do inline, so I can change it right there on the fly. It looks like we could do this as well. I could say dot get style and actually say dot add is that right? Dot add, oh, get style class, my bad. And then add it that way. Let's see if that works. Probably won't work for me. Yeah. But anyways, that's inline styling, and we can do that right on the fly. We don't have to get a separate CSS file involved. We can actually do the styling right here. You know, and I can do this multiple times. I can actually have this like this, and I can say font weight bold. I will say this, this file demo. You know what? That might be the problem right there. Let me comment that out for a second. That might be the issue. Now, yeah, for some reason you're able to do it. I'm not. You know, let me try this. I want to try something over here. I'm going to try this guy over here. Okay. Looks like it's that might be the issue. I've got two chapter 13. Anyways, okay. You guys get the gist. Okay. Any questions? On page 838, we've got this thing called radio buttons. Now, radio buttons are kind of they're kind of a really neat thing to have, and you've seen it before. When you press a button, it selects that. If you click the next button, it deselects the previous button. So you can only have one selected at a time. So let's open up Metric Converter. So in here we have some global objects, some global object variables. I've got a text field called kilo text field, a label called result label, a radio button, miles button, radio button, feet button, and radio button, inches button. So apparently we want these 5 objects to be available to every method inside this project. So down here I create a label, prompt label, enter the distance in kilometers. Now here's the kilo text field. So up there we created an empty shell. Down here we instantiate it. The kilo text field is instantiated as a new text field. The miles button is instantiated as a new radio button. Convert to miles is going to be the label on it. Feet button, same thing. Inches button, same thing. Now, if we, on line 52 here, I say miles button dot selected true. If I didn't have this number item, this code right here on line 52, none of the radio buttons would be selected when we first went into it. What's always good to have at least one of the radio buttons selected. So to do that, I'm going to make the miles button dot selected equals true. So when this form opens up, that button will be selected. Now, here's the problem, is if I wanted different sets of radio buttons on this form, I want you to think of it this way. All the radio buttons have to be on their own mountain, okay? If all the radio buttons are on the same mountain, then they would all basically be interactive. They'd all be considered the same radio button group. So what we have to do is we have to put each set of buttons on its own mountain so that when we go to use those buttons, and when I select this button, it deselects the other button, it just affects this group. So to do that, I have to create what's called a toggle group. So I'm going to call it, so the toggle group is the class. I'm going to create an object, a toggle grouped object called radio group. And I'm going to instantiate it as a new toggle group. Then, so I've got the group created. Now I got to put each radio button inside of that toggle group. To do that, I say miles button dot set toggle group radio group. So it says put the miles button inside of this toggle group object radio group. I do the same thing with feet. I do the same thing with inches. Now, if I had a different set of radio buttons, I would create a separate toggle group just for that group of radio buttons. I've got a button called calc button. I'm going to instantiate a new button that's going to have the word convert on it. I've got my set action. So when I click on this, it's going to call the calc button, the calc button set on action. It's going to call the calc button handler. Or it's going to instantiate a new calc button handler. The result label is going to be instantiated as a new label. We go ahead and build an H box called prompt H box, and we go ahead and set the spacing to 10. We put the prompt label in there and the kilo text. We're going to take the H box radio button, we're going to create another H box group called radio H box, and we're going to put those 3 buttons in there. We're going to have the spacing set to 20. We're going to create a V box. Spacing in there is going to be 10. We're going to put the prompt H box, the radio H box, and the calc button in that vertical box. So in these 2 H boxes, they're going to be this way, and the V boxes, everything's going to be lined up this way. I changed the main, so the V box is the main V box. We're going to set the alignment to center. We're going to set the main V box, set the padding to 10. We put the main V box in the scene. We put the scene in the stage. We set a title of the stage, and then we go ahead and set the show. So if we run this, so there I have my label, distance kilometers, and a text box. And I got convert to miles. Notice that it's already selected. Okay. Now stay where you're at. I just want to show you what happens if I were to comment this out and then run it again. Now for some reason my stuff is caching. It's caching in the background, so that it. So let me do this. Am I in? Bear with me. Yeah, I know. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So you saw that when you removed that, when you commented that out and reran it, that wasn't selected. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we run this guy. There's our label in our text box. There's our 3. Now again, these are inside of a toggle group, so they are interact with each other. So if I click on convert to feet, look what it did. It took it away from convert to miles, so on and so forth. So I can actually come in here and type in 106. And when I convert it to miles, that's 65.87. If I click, so if it's kilometers, I'm going to convert it to feet and click convert. It's 347,786. If I want to convert to inches and click convert, that's 4,173,220,000. 4,170,220 inches is basically how many inches in a kilometer, in 106 kilometers. So this program is still running. As long as this window's open, this program is running. It doesn't stop running until I click this X right here. So again, the thing to take away from this is if we're going to use radio buttons, we have to make sure they're in their own group. So we have to create a toggle group, and we have to put those radio buttons in that toggle group so that those 3 or 4 or how many radio buttons that you have only interact with each other and no other radio buttons on this form that we're creating. Any questions on that? Now, in this program we just ran, we had an event listener. It's all the way down here at the bottom. We had our calc button handler, and what it does is, so when we clicked on that event, it automatically calls this handle method, and we set 3 different constants: miles conversion, feet conversion, inches conversion. We've got our basically 3 different numbers there, our doubles. We got a result. We create a result, and we set it to 0. And then we say double kilometers equals whatever we get from that text field, we convert to a double. So kilo text field dot get the text, convert it to a double, and put it in kilometers. And then we say if miles button dot is selected. So if that is set, it's going to basically say result equals kilometer times miles conversion. Now notice we're not using else's here. I would probably use an else or maybe even a select case, because each one of these if statements will get executed. And if there's no need to execute all of them, if this was true, then the other 2 are basically false. It's not that big of a deal because it's, we're talking milliseconds. So if that is selected, meaning it's got basically a black circle in it, it's going to execute line 121. If the feet button is selected, it's going to execute line 124. If the inches button is selected, it's going to execute 127. And then it's going to say result labels.set text format, and it's going to take the result and round it to 2 decimal places with 1,000 separator. Okay. Now, that was a button click event handler. Another thing that we can do is let's open up the radio button event. And if we look at this guy, what we're going to do is we're going to have some images displayed on the screen. And each one's going to have a radio button associated with it. So I've got my flower image, and it's going to basically be equal to the flower.jpg, and the sunset is equal to the sunset.jpg. We've got info image, image.new image. So we create an image view object called image view, and we're going to go ahead and put the flower image in it. I go ahead and set the width of the image view to 200. I go ahead and use the preserve ratio equals true, so that means I don't have to worry about the width. If you remember, the preserve ratio says, hey, make sure the picture stays to 200, but keep its ratio. So if it's real long and tall, or if it's narrow and tall, and I said make sure the width is 200, it's going to make sure that the length fits the width. We go ahead and put that into the image box of an H box. We go ahead and set the alignment of the H box to center. And then I create two radio buttons. I got flower radio and sunset radio. Each one of those buttons is going to be labeled with flower and sunset. I go ahead and say flower radio.set selected true. So that button will automatically be selected true. I create my toggle group, because again, I always have to make sure that my radio buttons are grouped together so they interact with each other only. And I go ahead and set the flower radio.set toggle group radio group, sunset.radio or sunset radio.set toggle group radio group. So it basically puts these two radio button objects inside of this toggle group. Now, I'm using my lambda, and it says flower radio dot set on action event. Okay, so what that says is if I click on the radio, the flower radio button, when I click on it, it's going to say image view dot set image flower image. If I click on the sunset radio button, it's going to automatically kick off this set action lambda, and it's going to call the image view.set image sunset image. Okay, again, neither one of these will be executed unless I click on that radio button. I create a VBox called radio VBox, and I go ahead and put my two radio buttons in there. I set the padding to 30. My VBox, main VBox, I go ahead and put those images in there. So I've got two VBoxes. One's got the radio buttons and one has the images. I then, I'm sorry, I take it back. There is radio buttons, and then the main box has the image box and radio button. Okay, I see what they're doing. They have two radio buttons and they've got one image box, because again, we're going to click on the radio button and that image is going to go in there. Okay, right? I got confused there. So this main V box is going to have the image box and the radio V box that we just created. I go ahead and put the main V box in the scene. I put the scene in the stage. I show the stage. I click on it, and there it is. So there's my flower image and my two radio buttons. And if I click on sunset, it automatically puts the sunset in that image viewer. That's really all we're doing. We're just putting each one of those image inside of the image viewer. Now, the main takeaway from this is to realize that we can set an action on the radio button itself. We don't have to have a separate, just like we've seen with the buttons, we can actually use the lambda on set on action on the actual control itself. Any questions on that? Okay, So we have radio buttons. We also have things called check boxes. And so check boxes, so radio buttons we're only allowed to have one at a time. Check boxes, we can have multiple checked. And so let's just open up pizzatoppings.java. And right off the bat, notice I've got 4 global object variables we're going to have. I've got a checkbox, pepperoni checkbox, checkbox cheese checkbox, and checkbox anchovies checkbox, and then I've got a label, total label. So that means we're going to have multiple methods, and we want these global object variables to be utilized by any method inside of this project. So inside my start, so this is where I instantiate my pepperoni checkbox. This instantiates as a new checkbox, pepperoni $3. I instantiate my cheese checkbox. I instantiate my anchovies checkbox. I create a button called total button, and it's basically instantiated as a new button with the label get total. My total button.set on action, we're going to call the total button handler. Just down here, here's my total button handler, which is a class. Remember, that's a class because instantiated as a new total button handler class. My total label is instantiated as a new label, and it's got $0.00. I create a VBox, spacing 10. I put the pepperoni checkbox, cheese checkbox, and anchovies checkbox in there. So they're going to basically be up and down. I got a main VBox. Set the alignment of that to position center, so everything inside there will be centered. I've got my main VBox set padding, so everything outside of that VBox is going to basically be 10 pixels padding. I put my main VBox in the scene. I put my scene in the primary stage, and I show it. Now let's take a look at this event handler. So here's my total button handler. So when I click on it, it's going to call this handle method. In there, I create a variable that's a double called result, set to 0. It says if pepperoni checkbox is selected, we're going to say result plus equal 3. If the cheese checkbox is selected, result plus equal 2. If the anchovies checkbox is selected, we're going to add 1 to the result. Then I go ahead and say total label.set text, string format. So again, I'm going to take the result, display put it in the total label, and it's going to have $, and it's going to have 1,000 separator and rounded to 2 decimal places. So let's run it. And there's our 3 check boxes. And I can check the pepperoni, and if I click get total, it puts 3 in here. Well, if I go ahead and check the cheese, now it's $5. If I add anchovies, it's now $6. You know what? I don't want cheese. I uncheck the cheese, I click get total, and it's now down to $4. So again, this program is still running. It does not stop running until I click this X. So as I click here and I click the get total button, it's going to see if those items are selected or not, and then display the results. I can uncheck the pepperoni and get a cheese pizza with anchovies for $3. And when I click the X, the run of the program stops, and everything's good. So any questions on checkboxes? The one thing you'll notice is we did not need a toggle group, because we could have multiple checkboxes. We want to know if a checkbox is selected or not, and we're going to deal with that. So text boxes are different than radio buttons, and that radio buttons need to interact with each other. Checkboxes don't. We just need to be able to check it, and then we have to deal with that. Is selected method of that checkbox. So kind of a side note, this handle method gets executed every time we click on it. So it sets the result to 0, check to see if those are selected to add that numeric value to the result, and then it basically displays the result at the bottom. Okay, on page 853, we have what are called list view controls. A list view control displays a list of items and allows the user to select things from that list. So let's open up List View Demo 1. And inside of our start, we have list view. Now, I want you to think of a list view is kind of like an array list that we've seen in the previous chapters. We have to tell it what type of data is going to be in this list view. So this less than, string, greater than, that says this list view will only contain string data. So we're creating a list view object. It's going to be called list view, lowercase l, and we're going to instantiate it as a new list view. Notice we've got the less than and greater than, and then the parentheses for our constructor. This is a no-art constructor. Then we say list view dot set preference size to 120 by 100. So 120, I think it's 120 tall by 100 wide. And then list view dot get items add all, and inside of there we basically have our items separated by commas. We're going to have Steve, Bethany, Will, and Katrina. We then create a label object called selected name label, and we're going to instantiate it as a new label, and it's going to say select a name. We've got a button, get button, instantiate as a new button. It's going to say get the selected or selection. Button.get set on action event. So we're going to use the lambda. It says if we basically click on a button, it's going to automatically just execute what's inside of this event lambda. We're going to create a string called selected. It's going to be equal to whatever's in the list view.getSelectedModel.getSelectedItem. So whatever we clicked on in that label. And then we're going to say selected name label.setText selected. So that selected name label, which is a label up here, it's going to have whatever, it's going to basically set the text out label to whatever was selected up here in our list view. We take our, again, this doesn't get executed until we basically run it and actually click the button itself. We got a VBox, padding 10, we put the list view in there, we put the selected name label in there, and we get the get button in there. So again, since it's vertical, it's going to be this way. Set the padding to 10, set the alignment of everything inside the VBox to center. I then put the VBox in the scene in the stage, and I show the stage. So when I run it, this is what a list view looks like. There's Steve, Bethany, Will, Katrina. Now notice it's kind of like a radio button. As I click on each one, basically the other one gets deselected. Notice it said select a name. When I click get the selection, it replaces what's inside of that label, that selected name label, and puts in whatever was selected. Now, one thing I want to point out is if I run this and I click get the selected, notice that nothing gets put in here. Now we can code around that. We'll see that in a little bit here. We can actually code around that and say we can tell if anything was selected or not. So any questions on a list view? Okay. So let's look at list view demo 2. And here I've got a list view called list view, and I set the preference size to 120 by 100. And I go ahead and add Steve, Bethany, Will, and Katrina. I've got my label, select the name, and I've got my button. Okay, so everything so far looks great. Same as the other one. I've got my action event. Now, inside this action event, I now have if list view.getSelectionModel.getSelectedIndex. This is the index. Each one of those, so this is just like an array list. Each one of those items inside that list view has an index number attached to it. If the getSelectedIndex, so here's what happens. Up here when this gets created and nothing is selected, the index automatically is set to -1. So down here I'll say if the getSelectedModel.getSelectedIndex is not equal -1, I'm going to then get the selected item and put it into this selected variable, string variable. And then I'm going to selected name label.setText equals selected. Now, if it is equal to -1, I'm going to display nothing was selected. Now, again, I don't like not logic, so I would rather do this. You don't have to do this. I'm doing this as an example. Well, what did I do wrong? Oh, I know what I did wrong. Shoot. But here's a way to, can I go? Okay. What's the rule about equal to? It's 2 equal signs. So here, this to me reads so much better. If list view.getSelection.getSelectedIndex is equal to -1, and I would put a comment in here that says nothing, no item selected in list view. And else, go ahead and let's do the rest of it. Okay. Then we go ahead and got our V-box. We set the padding, we set the alignment. We put the V-box in the scene. We set the scene to the stage, and then we show the stage, which is the window. And let's run it. And again, don't select anything, but when I click on Get Selected, note it says nothing selected. Then I can click Steve, show Steve. I can click Bethany. Now, let's try this. I'm going to click Bethany. I'm going to hold down my Control key. I'm going to try to click on something else, and I can't. So I can only select one at a time. So the only difference between this and the previous program is this list view.getSelectedModel.getSelectedIndex. We can check to see is if it's equal to -1, that means nothing was selected and we can deal with it. And the previous one, when we ran it, it displayed nothing. And again, the last thing we ever want to do is confuse our users. So we always want to make sure we keep the user up to date on what's going on. So when they click on it, nothing displays, the user doesn't know what's going on. Now we do. We can actually just tell the user, hey, you didn't select anything. You got to make sure you select something. Any questions on that? Okay. If we take a look at List Demo 3, everything is the same, except down here we've got listview.getSelectedModel.SelectedItemProperty.addListener.event. Okay. So what we're doing is, instead of clicking a button, we're just going to add a listener to the list view item itself. When we click on the list view item, that's when it's going to run this Lambda event. So when we click on it, it's going to basically grab the selected item and put it into the string selected variable. And we go ahead and put that selected into the selected name label.setText. Again, that won't get executed until we actually... Now notice we didn't have to deal with the -1 because now this gets executed when we click on something. So we are clicking on something, so we don't have to worry about the -1. And again, we go ahead and everything down below here is the same. We create our VBox, we put the padding on our VBox, we go ahead and set the alignment, put the VBox in the scene, put the scene in the stage, and we show the stage. So when we run it, when I click on Steve, it says Steve. Click on Bethany, Will, Katrina, so on and so forth. So this time we've got the event handler on the list view itself. Any questions on that? Let's see if we can do a lab. Okay.